Hello, welcome back. Our Red Mages Only journeys continue this week in Final Fantasy XII. Final Fantasy V went, away. Let's hop in here and see if this journey will continue any better. Given this game's license board system, I am very curious to see how Red Mages handle. But enough preamble, let's dive into the game. We start, as always, playing as Rex for the tutorial. And then Rex has a very bad day, and we continue up with our main character Vaughn in the sewers, fighting some rats, as is contractually obligated in any JRPG. Running around, checking off checkboxes, and get the hunt for a tomato. We also get access to our license board selection and choose the Red Battle Mage. I'm not really sure why it's called Battle Mage in this one, rather than just Mage, but it doesn't really matter. It's close enough. As I head out to kill a tomato, let's talk Red Mage. So Red Mage in this game is really weird, only gaining access to the middle spell levels and notably excludes both high level and low level spells. Very weird. But they do get their own spell school, Arcane, which includes 3 flavors of Dark, the useless death spell, and Ardor, which we will get to. They also use Mystic Armor rather than more medium armor they have in previous games, and get maces rather than swords. And shields, my beloved. Maces notably only use magic in the damage formula, so they scale okay. We'll see how all this affects the ongoing playthrough. Meet up with Penelo in my hunt for a Sunstone, and she too gets turned into a Red Mage. Because of Red Mage's reliance on the magic stat for both physical attacks and spells, Penelo will be in my permanent party once she rejoins later on. Boy howdy, the early stages of Final Fantasy XII are kind of annoying. I hate not having access to the Gambit system until Balthier joins. All the fights up to then kind of suck. I also can't buy maces yet. Oh well, good thing my characters have their innate licenses and weapons, those will have to do for now. I shove some stones into some other stones to collect some sun juice, and I have the sunstone I need to invade the big party and steal all their treasure. Head through the sewers, fighting rats and bats to pay the toll, and it's to the grand excitement of our first shouting puzzle, which I actually botch because I'm impatient and not paying enough attention. I just fully run in the wrong direction. Mortifying. But party over, and it's time for Balthier and Fran to join the team and teach me about gambits, for like the 100th time. I know Balthier, it's just like catching a Pokemon. Balthier and Fran get to be Red Mages too. Neither is a permanent party member, but Fran having Cure at the start is always a nice boon. Back through the sewers, because boy that toll is expensive, and it's time for our first boss. Some random flan. I quickly switch Fran's attack gambit to use fire rather than attack to make this very easy boss fight even easier. Some more running, and it's already second boss time. Most of this fight is just regular attacks. I did briefly consider grabbing different spells earlier to make this fight easier, but honestly just attacking with regular weapons does more than enough damage to bring this boss down pretty quickly. I really regret switching all of my characters to staves and Black Mages only immediately. But now the party needs to break out of Nalbina, which we do, and arrive in Barheim. And here I can buy our first maces for everyone, and fully outfit the party. Hooray! The signature Red Mage weapon. The mace. No, but seriously, having a melee weapon be purely magic-based is actually pretty great. Time to head through the Barheim passage. I don't really have any spells, and my maces are all doing pretty good damage, so most of this is just spamming regular attacks as normal. And at the save crystal, I unlocked the license for Arcane 1, giving my party access to the very nice Dark spell. Which leads me to my next boss, the Mimic Queen, during which I get to show off the Dark spell. Because it both deals more damage than other tier 1 magics, and also hits in an area. This means I can deal good damage to the Mimic Queen and destroy her ads. Weird that the Red Mage magic was more effective at damage in this fight than Black Mage's. What can you do? Run through the desert back to Rabanaster, and Bosch joins the party full time, though because of his bad magic and worse MP, he will never be in the active party. I don't think I ever even actually assigned his license grid. Penelo has been kidnapped, and it's time for a flight to Bujerba. And here, I can buy some better maces, a couple useful spells, specifically Protect and Shell, which we might actually use in this run. Lamont joins up as a guest, and it's time for the Lusu Mines. Nothing interesting here, other than reaching the end of the mines and then running from the Bangao group. And it's time for our second shouting puzzle, which I solve beautifully. I then head back into the mines to do some undead grinding for Gil, which takes a bit, and because of my low level, doesn't go super great, but gotta be on that grind set. Money grinding completed, time to resume the main quest. Captured and team up with Vossler, I quickly make my way through the Leviathan. Pretty early, switch Vaughn to use Dark for attack rather than just regular attack. It deals more damage than his mace, and lets me hit multiple enemies, which is invaluable when there are so many enemies. And it's time for the next boss fight. Some random dudes. Vaughn and Balthier spam Dark to hit all the enemies, and this fight ends very quickly. Okay, calm it down, everyone. This is definitely not a boss fight worthy of a victory animation. Ashe is in the party, and she replaces Balthier because she has a very good magic stat. Bye, Balthier. See you never again. Back through the Leviathan, this time with a siren ringing in my ear constantly. And Penelo gets added back to the party, and just like Black Mages, this means my final party of Ashe, Penelo, and Vaughn are assembled. Listen, I'd love to use different characters, but Red Mages need only magic, just like Black Mages did. I go into the next fight with Fran instead of Penelo, for some reason. Laziness, I assume? But the ability to heal and deal decent melee damage means this fight goes off without a hitch. Penelo is actually added to the active party, and it's time to traverse the Ogier and Namiensa Sandseas, which, as ever, are incredibly boring. Really unclear why this game decided to kind of kill its pacing by making you run through two very boring areas where nothing really interesting happens, back to back. As a longtime fan of Final Fantasy XII, this is still kind of baffling. Fortunately, there is a nice shop at the end that sells some nice gear upgrades. I can't afford everything I want yet, but I'll get the rest before too much longer. Into the next fight with Garuda, who, despite hitting like a truck, goes down quite easily, mostly because it takes huge damage from Dark. I was curious how much impact arcane magic would have, and yeah, turns out Dark may be limited by the Dark damage type, but AoE and good damage definitely helps. I'm not even going to pretend to fight the first demon wall, and instead focused on the second, mandatory one. Despite Vaughn spending most of the fight unconscious and Penelo getting X-zoned, my damage is just entirely too good, and the demon wall drops well within the time I have. I explore the rest of the tomb, and it's time for the first Esper, and debatably, first proper boss, Belias. I set up a Protect Gambit before the fight to reduce Belias' physical damage, and my goodness, Aqua and physical damage just tear through this boss's HP. I'm not even sure how much I'll need to cut out with how quickly it dies. Alright, Red Mages, I see you. But it's already time for another fight against Vossler, and it's pretty easy, especially compared to Black Mages. I can heal, add defensive buffs, and do regular attacks with maces. While Vossler gets quite aggressive at low HP, it doesn't really matter because he doesn't last long enough at low HP for that to be an issue. Time to head south through the Giza Plains, but wet this time, then through the Osmond Plains to reach Jahara. Nothing really interesting happens en route, and we team up with Larsa again on the way to Mount bur-omisace. But first, time to slaughter some panthers. This is a great area to build up a chain gauge and grind a bunch of gil for acquiring some of the up-to-date equipment. The new equipment is good, the LP for license board stuff is also great. After a good bit of that, to afford new stuff, and I arrive in a root village to advance the plot further. Gotta rescue Fran's sister to advance on our way, so it's time to borrow a chocobo and head through the Hen Mines. Most of which goes pretty okay. I don't have the same AoE damage as Black Mages would, but that is mostly made up for just having actual weapons to hit with. I think the biggest strain I'm facing is there are not enough gambit slots to create as many gambits as I'd like. Mines explored, time for the boss. This boss was a bit of a pain in Black Mages only because he is the first boss to use Reflect. Having a weapon to hit with does a lot, but it's still kind of a slog though. First, because it keeps casting Disable on the party. Second is that while maces deal more damage than staves, they're still not great. And by the end, when the boss reduces the damage it takes even further, that health bar just crawls to the end. I really hope that awful damage doesn't come back to bite me in the butt like it did in Final Fantasy 3 and 5. I don't know that I have patience for any more 25-minute boss fights. But it's already time for the next boss, Spore Dragon, which is really a pain thanks to the many statuses it inflicts. And while Red Mages can, in theory, learn Asuna, It's locked behind a near endgame Esper. So, at least for now, I must clear these statuses manually. Fortunately, the drag isn't nearly as beefy as the Hen Mines dragon, and it's weak to wind magic. I can then head through the frozen Paramina Rift to reach Mount bur-omisace and its many, many shiny new items. And it's back into the Paramina Rift to head for the Stillshrine of Miriam. I do get briefly lost here, because I always forget which way I'm actually supposed to go and end up in the Feywild. Way too low a level for that nonsense. We will be back there much later. The Stillshrine of Miriam. I'm not dealing as much damage as I'd like against the enemies in here, but that's okay. I just need to get through the early areas to access the next good money spot. That should easily get me the gil, LP, and XP that I want. And another few minutes and I arrive at the Big Undead Circle. A great place to loop around killing undead to build up a chain combo for loot drops and such. I spend a decent bit of time here so I can afford the best equipment and have funds for the next few hub areas. Money acquired, time to run a quick errand. First, I book an airship ride from Rabanastre to Nalbana, only because then I can buy 99 teleport stones in the shop. This is more teleport stones than I will ever need again. Glad I know that, rather than needing to do a bunch of hunts. Only a fool would think you need to do that. Back to the Stillshrine, and money grinding time is over, and it's time for the first boss, Venuskar. Venuskar has a magnetic field slowing down metal armor, which isn't relevant. It also dies so fast I don't have anything else to say about it. Beating this unlocks the actual boss of the Stillshrine. Marius is another boss that is strong and uses Reflect. I set up Protect and Shell Gambits to help with defense and equip Ice Shields to reduce ice damage even further. I can't rely on magic for attacking, but fortunately my maces deal enough damage that the fight doesn't actually take too long. Plus, not having to stop to heal as much thanks to Protect and Shell is great. So far, Red Mages only seems to be handling basically every boss encounter better than Black Mages did. Which I guess isn't too surprising, but still. Back to bur-omisace to buy some equipment, and it's time for Bergen. He comes with an entourage that dies very quickly thanks to Darkra. But the judge himself is beefier. And most notably, more damaging. While I do take out the judge without too much difficulty, I have to do a bit of yo-yoing on my characters because Bergen can take down a character in just a few hits. Is durability going to be Red Mage's downfall? I'm sure it's going to be something. The question is just what. Next destination is Archades, which means it's time for a very long walk. Through the Mossforan high wastes. Then through the delightful Salika wood. Then across scenic Fawn Coast. I do love Final Fantasy XII, but it does really suffer in some of these sections where the plot basically says run to the next destination, several entire maps away. And don't worry, nothing interesting will happen on the journey. And the shops you have along the way to buy better equipment all feel like traps, because they will be outpaced by later shops and there are no meaningful fights between them. Anyway, Tichita Uplands, another very pretty map to run through where nothing happens, and it's into the Sochen Cave Palace, where finally we have some bosses. First is the Onion Royalty, a not too difficult fight in theory, made considerably more difficult by all the statuses these little onions throw around. Fortunately, they are a group and Darkra is still very powerful, so I'm able to crush them pretty quickly. Next is Ahriman, an even more difficult boss fight. I managed to take out most of its HP very quickly, but it uses Doom and Immobilize to completely devastate my party. I tried to switch some of my other allies in, and nah, that doesn't really work. They have no levels, no licenses, and no equipment, so yeah, that's not gonna work. Time to try again. This time I prep my party with Protect, Shell, and Regen, and change the main attack to Thundara to take advantage of the Ahriman splitting itself. This goes fine-ish. The problem is Ahriman can still kill even with those buffs, and the MP toll is pretty high. I try to restore MP with ethers, but my results are mixed. Near the end, I switch back to regular attacks and play a bunch of Revive Yo-Yo with my party, which does just barely manage to be enough. I end with basically no MP and had to use a bunch of items, but my party triumphs over what may end up being the hardest fight in the game. Sochen completed, it's Archades time. Archades has a bunch of new equipment available, but I need some more money. First, back to the tavern in Rabanastre, so I can unlock the monograph for undead drops, and it's back to the Stillshrine for a good old run around slaughtering undead. Whee! Money acquired, it's back to Archades to buy new equipment, and it's time for Drachlor. Nothing really interesting here. There are some nice motes that I can pick up so I can forget about them and never use them. And time for a sit fight. He has several little drones running around, but between the damage I'm dealing and my ability to heal, he can't really do anything to me. So it's really just spam kind of weak mace attacks while healing up the party, and the fight doesn't take very long, and isn't really difficult. And it's time for the last long walk through random areas towards an actual destination. Back into Golmore Jungle, then into the Feywild. I do stop in the Feywild to slaughter a bunch of the Mirror Knights here, as the loot they drop is the best way to grind money in the entire game, and I will need this money to get through the final areas of the game. Then time for Rafflesia, who combines rough status effects with an area effect that drains MP constantly. Except it is also comically fragile and dies very quickly to me just spamming mace attacks. I'm actually surprised about this one. I was expecting the hindrance on spellcasting to make that fight way more difficult. Are red mages actually just good in this game? And I've arrived at Giruvegan, but first, back to Barheim to actually sell all the loot I got on the trip and buy some spells and better armor. No better weapons, which will become a bit of a theme, but I have Darka. Time for our next boss, Daedalus, who I recall, it's like a truck. So I give Vaughn a bubble belt to double his max HP, and make sure Penello sets up Protect to reduce the damage. The fight goes very well, and then I die, because this boss's damage is almost comically swingy. I have some opinions about the swinginess of damage in Final Fantasy 1 and 3, and I'm even more baffled that they brought those issues back 20 years later. Okay, I really can't afford to leave Daedalus alive for any amount of time at low HP, so I hop into trial mode to get the LP I need to get some quickenings on my party, so I can deal some big damage very quickly. And it's back into the fight with the same setup, but now a secret weapon. And it's time to watch some very long quickening animations. Quickenings, while initially cool, are my least favorite of the limit break-esque mechanics in Final Fantasy. Oh well, do a good job at quickenings and, whoops, don't actually do good enough and everyone dies. One more try and it's still not enough HP damage. But I don't get immediately bodied, so I managed to take out the last of its HP by just spamming attacks. Goodness, I have no idea why that fight is always such a pain. It just deals so much damage when it's at low health. Anyway, time to finally explore Giruvegan proper, and it's fine. Slow, but fine. And it's next boss time. Tyrant has a field effect that stops item usage. I think I basically always forget in this game because I'm never using items. It is also weak to blizzard damage, and isn't really very strong, so goodbye. It is big crystal time, except the crystal is boring, so it's actually next boss time. The Esper Shemhazai. It can hit very hard with flare and shock, and also use siphon. Despite a few allies going down, it's not really strong enough to actually push my party. I use quickenings to take out its last chunk of HP. Beating Shemhazai means I can finally get access to Asuna and Cleanse with one of my characters, which is a huge boon. I already have Asuna, but I need to take a quick trip into the Cerobi Steppe to get Cleanse. The chest that has it only has a 25% chance to spawn, and I get it in one. And there is a convenient airship anchor right past there to take me to the big final boss rush that is the Ridorana Cataract. I mean, most of the boss rush is in the Pharos, but I have to land at the Ridorana Cataract. I do forget there is a row of traps that leads up to the save crystal, and I do have a bit of an incident where I almost die, but it's fine. Time for Hydro, same strat as most prior bosses. I have more than enough healing to keep my party up and running, and while mace damage isn't great, it is good enough for this comparatively easy fight. Next up is Pandemonium. Start by dispelling its buffs, and then just attack it down. It does put up an everything-proof shield, which lasts frankly longer than it should, but it's not enough to turn the fight. Next is Slight. As before, dispel and try my normal strat of just spamming attacks and Slight deals just way too much damage, even before it reaches low HP. Once it is in low HP, it bodies my entire team. Time to skip the last bit of the fight with quickenings. Now that I've reached tier 3 quickenings, I can burn through Slight's last HP before it can destroy my entire party. Next up is Fenrir. It's strong, it hits hard, it loves to cast Bravery. So dispel its buffs and just spam attacks. Unlike some other heavy-hitting bosses, this boss doesn't seem to have a rough low HP phase, so I'm never in any danger, and that's another boss dead. But there is still plenty of up to go. The next area has a bunch of teleports, and the first teleport of interest gets me Ardor, the strongest arcane magic. It's basically even better Firaga, and only red mages get access to it. This is going to be very useful, very soon, but it's already next boss fight. Ashmal, another Esper. Immediately use a float mode to negate Ashmal's most dangerous attacks. Having cleanse means the disease he inflicts is also not a threat. A few party members do go down, so I have to use another float mode near the end of the fight. And because it's getting a little spicy for my taste, time to throw out another quickening string to end the fight. Or I think, but I actually do such a bad job it deals basically no damage. Time for some revive yo-yo again as party members keep dropping from 1 or 2 hits. Fortunately, my healing is fast enough that I am still getting hits in and the boss goes down. And Gabranth would like a word. Unfortunately for him, the word is mace, and it's delivered directly into his face. Very, very quickly. He pretends to be important, but I bring him down with very little issue. Next is the real battle against Sid. Dispel his buffs, and then beat him up until he summons Famfrit, and the fight actually gets interesting. Sid is now immune to damage, and I need to target Famfrit, which actually requires me doing a bit of adjustment to my gambits. Now, Famfrit is normally no joke, but honestly nothing really happens in this fight, other than having to adjust my gambits on the fly and continually dispel the boss buffs. No, not Sid, you idiots, attack Famfrit! Anyways, after many, many dispel casts, Famfrit goes down, and without his summoned Esper, Sid can't really do anything to threaten me. Then I spend an hour doing random prep for the final boss series. This footage is not usable, as it's very boring, and nothing interesting happens. Time for the final sequence of fights. Head into the Bahamut, wielding the comical might that is the Ardor spell, and it's time for Gabranth. Our last encounter showed off that he was actually kind of a chump. Let's see how this final fight goes. I take out half his HP incredibly quickly, but then he fully heals and goes into phase 2. And while I am dealing good damage, his attacks just spike so high I don't even have time to use a quickening. So yeah, that's not great. Let's try adding Protect to this battle plan to see if that makes a difference. The answer is no, not really. He resists damage very effectively at low HP, and while I try to keep my party alive, it does not work. Okay, new plan. I am a bit under the recommended level, so let's do a bit more grinding. Nabrius Deadlands have the best grinding spot in the game, at least without unlocking bonus areas of other dungeons. So I grab a couple levels to bring me up to the recommended level of 50. Let's give this another try and see how that goes. And the answer is great. Despite his considerable damage upgrade, I am now just durable enough to survive Gabranth's just unending attack strings. I am not super excited to try and fight Vayne though, considering how difficult the normally fairly easy Gabranth was. Phase 1 Vayne is easy as ever. I have defensive buffs, and he doesn't actually deal that much damage in Phase 1. It's actually just more annoying because his lengthy attack animations are unskippable. Phase 2 is much more difficult, because he now has his flying swords around. Chasing them with melee attacks would be a losing game, but Darka and Ardor actually make quick work of them. While Vayne tries to deal big damage with his attacks, it's really not enough to keep up with the wide range of healing I have. And mace damage is still not great, but it is enough to beat him down. Final phase time. I have a handful of Hastega motes I've been saving for the entire game. I also up the HP threshold for Ash's healing by 20%, so I can make sure my characters stay at or near max HP. Vayne's first barrier blocks magic, which doesn't matter because I'm only doing physical attacks. Vayne's second barrier does block physical attacks, so I enable Ardor and... was that 10,000 damage? Why is Ardor dealing 10,000 damage? That's more than my black mages were dealing with shock. I know Ardor has a slightly longer animation, but like not that much. Vane's final barrier stops all damage, so I turn off my damaging gambits and focus on buffs and healing. As soon as the last barrier goes down, I cast another Ardor, and the fight is over. Well, okay then. That was Red Mage's only Final Fantasy XII. I spent most of that playthrough waiting for it to become miserable, and while it looked like it was at a couple points, it just didn't. Red Mages just continued to work. The damage wasn't always the best, the durability wasn't always the best, but they did keep pushing forward. So, that was unexpected. I'll have more to say in the summary video coming out next week, but until then, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe if you'd like to see more of this nonsense, maybe leave a comment if you have something to say. But regardless, have a safe trip home.